Some names on this list changed entertainment forever. Others we barely got the chance to know, all of them. Gay men who lived in a world that didn't always accept them. Some deaths made headlines, others were hidden in silence. Today, I'm telling you their stories because they mattered, and they still do. His smile lit up movie screens across America. Rock Hudson was the epitome of 1950s masculinity, a leading man in films like Giant and Pillow Talk, beloved by millions, and secretly, a gay man living a double life. In July 1985, Hudson became the first major celebrity to publicly acknowledge he had AIDS. Just 3 months later, he was gone. His death at 59 wasn't just a tragedy, it was a wake-up call. Suddenly, AIDS had a face America couldn't ignore, and behind that face was a man who had spent decades hiding in plain sight. I still remember the shock on the news. For many, it was the first time they realized the disease was real. Rock Hudson didn't just leave behind a film legacy. He helped kickstart a national conversation that saved lives. He didn't choose to be a symbol, but he became one anyway. He was the original Latin heartthrob of silent film. Ramon Navarro starred in Ben-Hur in 1925 and became a matinee idol across the globe. But behind the fame was a man forced to keep his true self hidden. In 1968, Navarro's life ended in horror, beaten to death in his Los Angeles home by 2 brothers he had hired for companionship. The motive? A rumor that he had hidden thousands of dollars in his house. The truth? There was no such fortune. He was 69 years old. The tabloids had a field day. But beneath the headlines was the deeper tragedy of a man whose fame couldn't protect him. Not from violence, not from judgment, and certainly not from a world that refused to let him love openly. His death was brutal, senseless, and it still echoes today as a warning of how fragile safety can be, even for the most famous. You might not know his name, but you know his face. Denholm Elliott played the affable Marcus Brody in Indiana Jones and appeared in over 120 films and TV shows. Always the charming, slightly frazzled Englishman. But few knew the full story. Elliott was bisexual and kept his private life exactly that, private. In 1987, he was diagnosed with HIV. 5 years later, he died from complications of AIDS at age 70. His widow, Susan, later revealed how much pain he had hidden behind his humor. At a time when stigma silenced so many, Elliott's death was a quiet loss. No public outcry, no headlines. Just a fading out of a man who had brought joy to millions. But it's those quiet losses that build up over time, isn't it? Each one a thread pulled loose from the tapestry. Denholm Elliott didn't live loudly, but he mattered, and his silence speaks volumes. He wasn't your typical star, small, wiry, quirky. Michael Jeter carved out a career playing oddballs and underdogs. From The Green Mile to Evening Shade to Sesame Street, he had a gift for bringing tenderness to even the most eccentric roles. Openly gay and living with HIV, Jeter defied expectations at every turn. He won an Emmy, a Tony, and more than a few hearts. When he died in 2003 at just 50 from complications related to an epileptic seizure, it shocked fans, especially because he had been living positively with HIV for over a decade. In a time when being openly gay in Hollywood was still risky, Jeter brought visibility without fanfare. His death was sudden, but his life, that was a slow-burning triumph. He didn't need to be loud to be brave. He just showed up, told the truth, and made you feel something. And in the end, isn't that what great actors do? If you ever watched Are You Being Served, you remember Mr. Humphries, the flamboyant, cheeky salesman with the catchphrase, "I'm free." That role made John Inman a household name in Britain, and a lightning rod. Some praised him for bringing a gay character into the mainstream. Others accused the show of reinforcing stereotypes. Inman himself was famously private. Though he lived with his partner Ron Lynch for over 30 years, they didn't marry until civil partnerships became legal in 2005. That same year, he contracted hepatitis A, a liver infection typically mild, but which can be severe in older adults. He never fully recovered. Inman died in 2007 at the age of 71 from complications related to the infection. Some initially reported heart failure, but it was hepatitis A that claimed his life. His critics saw caricature, but millions saw joy. In an era when queer characters were rare or invisible, John Inman brought wit, camp, and a bit of daring into Britain's living rooms. It may not have been perfect representation, but it was a start. To the world, he was the all-American boy, blonde, blue-eyed, and irresistibly wholesome. But behind that 1950s heartthrob image, Tab Hunter was a man hiding a truth that could have ended his career overnight. He was gay. At the height of his fame, starring in films like Damn Yankees and topping the music charts, Hunter lived in constant fear of exposure. It wasn't until decades later, in his memoir, Tab Hunter Confidential, that he told the world his full story, including his long-term relationships with actor Anthony Perkins and figure skater Ronnie Robertson. When he died in 2018 at 86 from cardiac arrest, just days before his birthday, it felt like losing a piece of old Hollywood, but also a man who had finally reclaimed his own narrative. Hunter didn't get to live freely during his fame, but he made sure that future generations wouldn't have to hide. In the end, his legacy isn't just in the movies, it's in the truth he finally got to live out loud. If you've seen Wake in Fright, you know the raw intensity Gary Bond could bring to a role. A rising British actor in the 60s and 70s, Bond was handsome, magnetic, and, like so many of his peers, stuck between fame and secrecy. He was openly gay in private circles, but never discussed it in public, a survival tactic in a less tolerant industry. He had a long-term relationship with Jeremy Brett, known for playing Sherlock Holmes, but by the 1980s, Bond's star dimmed. Behind the scenes, he battled illness quietly. In 1995, he died from an AIDS-related illness at just 55. His death came just over a year after Brett's. It's easy to forget someone like Bond, not a household name, but someone who helped shape the cultural landscape with quiet courage. He was part of a generation that carried brilliance and burden in equal measure, and while his name might not be in lights, the shadows he helped dispel still matter. He was Perry Mason. He was Ironside. And for decades, he was also deeply closeted, not just to the public, but in his official Hollywood biography. Raymond Burr fabricated an entire backstory that included a dead wife and a lost child, all to avoid questions about his personal life. In truth, Burr was in a committed relationship with Robert Benavides for over 30 years, but it wasn't until after his death in 1993 from kidney cancer at 76 that the world learned the truth. Benavides inherited Burr's estate, including their shared home and vineyard. Looking back, the silence is heartbreaking. Burr gave so much to television, playing righteous men who always stood up for the truth. Yet off-screen, he was forced to live a lie. That contradiction between public hero and private fear speaks volumes about the time he lived in. And yet, through it all, he built a quiet, lasting love that outlived the mask. For many, he'll always be the second Darren from Bewitched, stepping into a beloved sitcom and making it his own. But Dick Sargent's most powerful role came years after the show ended. In 1991, he publicly came out as gay, becoming one of the first high-profile actors to do so voluntarily. He called himself a retroactive role model. And he was. At a time when many still feared backlash, Sargent chose truth. He became an advocate for LGBTQ+ rights and AIDS awareness, often appearing alongside his Bewitched co-star Elizabeth Montgomery at Pride events. When he died of prostate cancer in 1994 at age 64, he left behind more than just a TV legacy. He left behind courage. Sargent may not have come out during his prime, but when he did it with purpose. And for countless fans watching from the sidelines, that simple act of honesty meant everything. George Nader had it all. Movie star looks, major studio contracts, and the kind of roles that could have made him the next Rock Hudson. But he also had a secret. Nader was gay, and unlike many of his peers, he refused to marry for image. That choice came at a cost. When a scandalous photo of him with another man was discovered during the Rock Hudson tabloid panic, Universal Studios dropped him. He shifted to European films and cult sci-fi like Robot Monster, and later focused on writing. His novel Chrome was one of the first openly gay science fiction stories. Nader lived quietly with his longtime partner, Mark Miller, for over 50 years. He died in 2002 from pneumonia, aged 80. His Hollywood career may have been cut short, but his life wasn't a tragedy. It was an act of defiance. Nader didn't just walk away from the system. He built something honest in its place. For most people, he was Norman Bates, the eerie, repressed motel owner from Psycho. But off-screen, Anthony Perkins was living a much more complex version of repression. A deeply private man, he spent most of his life hiding his sexuality from the public, even from close colleagues. Perkins had long-term relationships with men, including actor Tab Hunter, but in the late 70s, he married photographer Barry Berenson. They had 2 children, including actor Oz Perkins. In 1990, he was diagnosed with HIV. He never went public with his diagnosis. When he died from AIDS-related pneumonia in 1992 at age 60, it shocked fans. His widow later said that Anthony kept his illness secret to protect his sons from stigma. Just 9 years later, Barry died aboard American Airlines Flight 11 on September 11th. It's one of those stories that hits you twice, once for what was lost, and again for what was hidden. He had the kind of screen presence that made you stop and watch. Best known as Dexter Stuffins on the sitcom Silver Spoons, Franklin Seals was a rare black, openly gay actor working in 1980s Hollywood, though the openly part mostly came later. Born in the U.S. Virgin Islands and trained at Juilliard under John Houseman, Seals had the talent to go far, but his career was cut short by illness and stigma. He died in 1990 at just 37 years old from complications related to AIDS. The industry barely blinked. There were no tributes, no retrospectives. It's one of the quietest losses on this list, and one of the most haunting. He was brilliant, he was breaking ground, and yet, because of when and how he died, his legacy was all but erased. Franklin Seals deserved better, and today, maybe just by remembering his name, we give him some of that. You'd recognize him in an instant, usually playing eccentric villains, twisted aristocrats, or comic foils. Victor Buono stole scenes in Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, Batman, and Beneath the Planet of the Apes. He was also one of the few actors of his time who winked at his own sexuality, calling himself a celibate homosexual in a 1970s interview. It was the closest he could safely come to being out. Buono's roles were often larger than life, but off-screen he struggled with his weight, mental health, and the pressures of a closeted life. He died of a heart attack in 1982, just 43 years old. It felt like the curtain dropped too early on someone who could have given us so much more. Victor Buono lived in a time when flamboyance could be tolerated, as long as it wasn't named. He played the clown, the villain, the oddball. But behind the performance was a man we're only just beginning to understand. Roddy McDowall grew up on screen. From child star in Lassie Come Home to adult roles in Planet of the Apes, he was always present, yet somehow always mysterious. A consummate character actor, photographer, and friend to seemingly every Hollywood legend, McDowall never publicly discussed his sexuality, but among those who knew him, he was quietly but proudly gay. He never married, he never had to invent a cover story. He simply lived his life, gently out of focus. When he died of cancer in 1998 at age 70, tributes poured in from across the industry. They spoke of his charm, his loyalty, his encyclopedic knowledge of film history. And maybe that's the legacy he wanted, not as a gay icon, not as a headline, but as someone who loved the art of performance. Still, his quiet authenticity mattered. In an era of masks, Roddy McDowall wore his truth with quiet grace. He was on the verge of greatness. Lenny Baker, a Tony Award-winning stage actor, was hailed for his emotional depth and neurotic charm in films like Next Stop, Greenwich Village. Sensitive and cerebral, he had a presence that felt fragile but unforgettable. In 1978, he was diagnosed with medullary thyroid cancer, a rare, aggressive form of cancer. He battled it for years, undergoing multiple surgeries and treatments, but the disease eventually took his life in 1982 at just 37 years old. In the years after his death, rumors emerged that he may have died of AIDS, a reflection of the era's paranoia and assumptions about gay actors. But official records and obituaries confirm the cause was cancer. It's a reminder that even in death, people like Baker weren't safe from speculation. What's certain is this: his talent was real, his impact was rising, and his name deserves to be remembered, not misunderstood. His voice could fill stadiums, his stage presence could bend time. Freddie Mercury, the legendary frontman of Queen, was one of the most electrifying performers to ever live. Born Farrokh Bulsara in Zanzibar, raised in India and England, he defied every expectation, including his own. For years, Freddie kept his private life guarded. Rumors swirled, but he rarely confirmed anything. It wasn't until November 23, 1991, that he publicly announced he had AIDS. Just 24 hours later, he was gone, dead from AIDS-related pneumonia at just 45. The speed of it still stuns me. But even more powerful than his death was how he lived. His music, from Bohemian Rhapsody to Somebody to Love, was larger than life, but also deeply personal, filled with longing, flamboyance, and unfiltered soul. He left behind a legacy that shattered boundaries in gender, genre, and performance. And though he never got to see it, his honesty in death helped humanize a disease too many wanted to ignore. Few voices could touch the soul like his. Luther Vandross wasn't just a singer, he was a feeling. From Never Too Much to Dance with My Father, his music was velvet, longing, and devotion wrapped in song. But there was another side of Luther the world never fully saw. In public, he kept his personal life private, intensely so. It wasn't until after his death that close friends like Bruce Vilanch and Patti LaBelle confirmed what many had quietly known. Luther was gay, but he never felt safe enough to say it out loud. LaBelle said he feared upsetting his mother and his fans. He just didn't want to upset the world. That phrase still lingers. In 2003, just after releasing what would be his final album, Dance with My Father, he suffered a massive stroke. 2 years later, in 2005, he passed away at just 54. He left behind 8 Grammy wins and a legacy that shaped modern R&B. Luther Vandross gave the world love songs we still play today, but the love he never got to share publicly, that's the part that still aches. He was just 16 when he starred alongside James Dean in Rebel Without a Cause, earning an Oscar nomination and becoming an overnight teen idol. But Sal Mineo's story didn't follow the usual arc. As his fame faded in the 60s, so did the offers, partly because he was openly gay in private circles and increasingly unafraid to take roles that challenged norms. He directed theater, advocated for gay rights, and was on the verge of a major comeback in 1976 with a new stage production. Then, everything stopped. One night, as Sal returned home from rehearsal, he was stabbed to death in an alley behind his apartment. He was just 37. For a long time, speculation swirled. Was it a hate crime? A robbery? Eventually, police arrested a man with no connection to Mineo, claiming it was a random mugging gone wrong. But even now, something about his death feels unresolved. Sal Mineo was brave at a time when most stayed silent. He paid for that bravery in more ways than one, but he also helped crack the door, just enough for others to start walking through. Every one of these men lived at the intersection of brilliance and burden, celebrated on stage but often forced into silence off it. Some died too soon. Others lived long enough to see the world begin to change. But all of them helped build the path we walk today. Their stories deserve more than just a passing mention. They deserve to be remembered. If this moved you, subscribe. I share these stories every week, honoring the lives behind the headlines. And tell me in the comments, which story hit you hardest and why?